The bread buns served at some of the most recognized sandwich and fast food chains in America contain a chemical the European Union banned from food in 1997. The same chemical functions as a blowing agent in foam rubber manufacturing the material in yoga mats, shoe soles, and athletic padding. In Singapore, putting it in food is punishable by fines reaching $450,000 and up to 15 years in prison. In the United States, the FDA permits it in flour at up to 45 parts per million and has never required a single chain to remove it. That's not an expression. That's not an exaggeration. The compound is ADA, and the only reason you may have heard of it is because a food blogger got 50 people to sign an online petition in 2014. Subway removed it that year. The FDA made no recommendation, issued no guidance, and changed no standard. Here's what took me a long time to figure out. This wasn't one chain's oversight. 8 operations on this list made a calculated, board-reviewed choice to keep using it, and they counted on the news cycle moving on before you looked up the ingredient list. By the end of this video, you'll know which 8 chains are still putting this compound in the bread they hand you, the 4 that went a genuinely different direction, and the industrial baking supply system that explains why so many chains made the exact same decision at the exact same time. Let's go. Number 8, Arby's. Arby's parent company. Inspire Brands, backed by Roark Capital, also owns Buffalo Wild Wings, Sonic, Dunkin'. You know what Arby's is selling before you walk in? The roast beef, the curly fries, the very specific identity of a chain that leans into being different. We Have the Meats is a genuinely effective piece of branding. It implies directness, transparency, a we're not hiding anything ethos that the campaign has spent years building. Inspire Brands is a private equity-backed restaurant conglomerate assembled through acquisitions between 2018 and 2021. Backed by Roark Capital, an Atlanta-based firm with over $37 billion in assets under management. Arby's marketing is managed separately from its sibling brands. Its supply chain is not. Arby's bread products, including its slider buns and several sandwich rolls, are documented in the chain's own ingredient disclosure materials to contain azodicarbonamide. ADA is a dough conditioner that works by oxidizing flour proteins, which accelerates gluten development, whitens the crumb, and allows industrial bread to behave consistently across thousands of locations regardless of ambient conditions. When bread containing ADA is baked, the compound does not simply disappear. It breaks down into urethane, also called ethyl carbamate, classified as a probable human carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, and into semicarbazide, which has demonstrated tumor-promoting effects in animal studies. The bread on your tray doesn't contain ADA. It contains what ADA becomes. For people with respiratory sensitivities, ADA, in its uncooked powdered form, is a documented occupational asthma trigger in industrial workers who handle it. The baking process provides a measure of protection. For people who take We Have the Meats to imply a broader transparency, the gap between the brand and the supply chain is one they have no mechanism to find without visiting an ingredient disclosure page most customers don't know exists. Arby's told you what cuts of meat they use. They didn't tell you what's in the bread holding them together. Number 7. Sonic Drive-In Parent Company. Inspire Brands' same Roark Capital portfolio as Arby's Sonic is built on the experience of the drive-in, the car hop, the slushie. The idea that fast food can carry a little genuine charm. It's one of the few chains that has maintained real affection across demographics that have largely turned on the fast food industry. That warmth is earned to a degree. Sonic was acquired by Inspire Brands in 2018. This matters for a specific reason. Inspire Brands operates shared supply chain infrastructure across its full portfolio. When a supplier makes a formulation decision using ADA in bun production, for example, that decision can apply across multiple brands simultaneously without any individual brand actively choosing it. Sonic's toasted buns contain ADA per the chain's own published ingredient documents. The decision to use it was not Sonic's alone to make. ADA's industrial utility is directly relevant here. It reduces baking time. It improves shelf stability. It allows a single bun to hold structural integrity through the heat, humidity, and holding periods built into drive-in service. These are cost and operational efficiency decisions, not nutritional ones. The EU identified exactly this calculus in 1997 when it prohibited ADA, not because there was evidence of acute toxicity, but because the risk-benefit analysis for a food additive whose primary function is industrial convenience and whose breakdown products include a probable carcinogen didn't clear the precautionary threshold European regulators apply. The FDA has never applied added a precautionary standard to ADA. It set a threshold of 45 parts per million and has revisited that number approximately 0 times since. For children and teenagers who consume fast food at significantly higher rates than other age groups and carry proportionally higher cumulative exposure to urethane and semicarbazide from repeated meals, the gap between the EU standard and the FDA standard is not academic. It is a number on a regulation that applies to their lunch. Sonic kept the charm. They kept the ADA too, and the charm is on the menu board. The ADA is not. Number 6. Wendy's parent company. Wendy's International LLC, publicly traded. NASDAQ. WEN, largest shareholder, Tree and Fund Management. Nelson Peltz Wendy's built its modern brand identity almost entirely on one word: fresh. Fresh, never frozen is one of the most recognized taglines in the fast food industry, a direct strike at McDonald's, and an implicit promise of a higher standard. Square burger patties, visible beef. The whole presentation says this chain does things differently. Tree and Fund Management, the activist investment firm run by Nelson Peltz, holds approximately 19% of Wendy's and has been a significant driver of operational and efficiency decisions since its stake was built. Wendy's ingredient disclosures list azodicarbonamide in their bun formulations. The fresh, never frozen promise applies to beef patties specifically. It does not extend to the bread those patties sit inside. I want you to sit with that specific contrast for a second. The meat is fresh. The bread contains a compound banned in 30 countries because of what it becomes under heat. Both of those sentences are simultaneously true. The marketing chose one to build a billion-dollar campaign around. The ingredient list contains the other, on page 4 of a PDF. The FDA's 45 ppm limit for ADA was established using intake modeling that did not account for the cumulative exposure patterns of regular fast food, people eating fast food 3, 4, or more times per week across decades. The limit was set for a population average. It was not calibrated for the segment that is the primary revenue driver of the quick service restaurant industry. Wendy's told you the beef is fresh. The bread was never part of the promise. Before we continue, there's a structural fact that explains why so many chains arrive at the exact same ingredient decision without appearing to coordinate. Most major fast food chains don't bake their own buns. They source them from industrial bread manufacturers who supply multiple chains simultaneously from the same production facilities. The two largest in the United States are Bimbo Bakeries USA, the American subsidiary of Grupo Bimbo, a Mexican multinational and the largest bread company on earth by revenue, and Flowers Foods, which owns Nature's Own, Wonder Bread, and Dave's Killer Bread. These two companies supply buns, rolls, and bread products to a significant portion of the quick service restaurant industry. When a supplier builds ADA into its standard formulation for consistency, shelf stability, and industrial baking performance, that formulation doesn't change because the logo on the restaurant changed. You can eat an Arby's bun and a Wendy's bun that came off the same production line, containing the same compound, sourced from the same flour. The chains don't always choose ADA. Sometimes they simply never choose otherwise. Number 5. McDonald's parent company. McDonald's Corporation, publicly traded, NICE. MCD. $25.5 billion revenue. In 2023, McDonald's is the reference point for the entire fast food industry. It is the most recognized food brand on the planet, which also makes it the most important example of what the industry's ingredient standards actually look like when public attention is elsewhere. McDonald's European locations comply with EU ingredient standards, including the prohibition on ADA. Its American locations operate under FDA standards, which permit it. The company has therefore concluded, through its own regulatory and supply chain analysis, that ADA is appropriate for American consumers and inappropriate for European ones. That is a documented corporate-level decision, not a supply chain oversight, not a regional formulation error, a deliberate policy that produces two different versions of the same product for two different markets. McDonald's ingredient disclosures list ADA in the buns used for several American sandwich products, including the McChicken and Filet-O-Fish. The McRib bun in its U.S. formulation contains ADA. In Germany, the same product's bread does not. The company knows why both things are true. The menu board in neither country mentions it. For the parents of children eating Happy Meals or McChicken sandwiches regularly, the fact that the European version of the same company's product is formulated to a higher standard is not a regulatory abstraction. It is a corporate policy that applies to your child's lunch, but not to a child in Stuttgart eating the same brand. McDonald's built its empire on consistency. What's consistent is that the American standard is lower, and they accept that. Number 4. Burger King parent company, Restaurant Brands International TSX Nice, QSR, majority owned by 3G Capital, also owns Tim Hortons, Popeyes. Firehouse Subs Burger King's entire modern identity is built on the flame-grilled, the smoke, the heat, the implication that something real and honest is happening in that kitchen. The brand invests significantly in ensuring you associate it with fire and authenticity. Restaurant Brands International is controlled by 3G Capital, the Brazilian-American private equity firm known for applying extreme cost discipline to its holdings, previously Heinz and Kraft. RBI reported $3 billion in revenue in 2023. Cost efficiency is not incidental to how the company operates. Burger King's U.S. ingredient disclosures list ADA in the buns for its Whopper, its chicken sandwiches, and several other core menu items. Its UK operations use bread formulated to comply with EU standards. Same brand, same logo, same flame, different bread. The flame grilling process that defines the marketing is applied to the meat. The bread that holds that meat contains a dough conditioner the EU determined posed an unnecessary risk. Both are true. One is in the advertising. One is in the small print. For people with existing respiratory conditions, asthma, chronic bronchitis, the urethane compound produced when ADA-containing bread is baked is an additional carcinogen exposure stacked on top of the particulate matter already associated with commercial cooking environments. The flame produces the smoke. The bun produces the chemistry. The menu board mentions neither. Burger King flame grills the meat. They bought the bread from a supplier using a banned ingredient. The fire was real, the disclosure wasn't. Number 3, Chick-fil-A parent company. Privately held, Cathy family ownership Chick-fil-A occupies a unique position in the American fast food landscape, a chain with a values-forward brand identity, a Sunday closure policy, and a customer loyalty level that is genuinely uncommon in the industry. People don't just eat at Chick-fil-A, they advocate for it. The brand operates in a category of trust that most chains never reach. Unlike every other entry on this list, Chick-fil-A is privately held by the Cathy family, not accountable to quarterly earnings calls or activist shareholders. That structural difference matters because it means ingredient decisions are made by owners, not by a board optimizing for margin. The company has used that independence to make genuinely different choices in some areas. The use of azodicarbonamide in its bun formulations, documented in Chick-fil-A's own online ingredient disclosure pages for its classic chicken, sandwich bun, and several other bread products, is not one of them. The Cathy family's decision to continue using ADA is not a private equity cost cutting move passed down from a new ownership structure. It is a family business decision made by owners with full autonomy over their supply chain, who reviewed the compound and decided it met their standard. They had access to the same data the European regulators used in 1997. They had the same Singapore penalty on record. They reached a different conclusion. For the significant portion of Chick-fil-A's customer base that chooses it specifically because they believe the brand's values extend to ingredient, quality people who read the story, who see the Sunday closure as evidence of principled operation, the ADA disclosure sits on a page the brand's marketing infrastructure has never pointed them toward. They had full autonomy over their supply chain. They kept the compound. You kept coming back because you thought they were different. Here's what you need to understand about why the EU banned ADA and the FDA didn't. The EU applies a precautionary principle to food additive regulation. A compound must demonstrate safety to be permitted. The FDA applies a risk threshold model. A compound must demonstrate harm above a measurable ceiling to be restricted. ADA clears the FDA threshold. It doesn't produce acute toxicity at 45 parts per million. What it produces are breakdown compounds urethane and semicarbazide that appear in animal studies as tumor promoters and probable carcinogens at sustained exposure. The EU looked at those breakdown compounds, applied the precautionary standard, and banned the parent compound. The FDA looked at the same data, applied the threshold model, and maintained the 45 ppm limit. The food companies choosing to use ADA are not choosing between a safe option and a dangerous one. They're choosing between an option the EU rejected in 1997 and one the FDA has never restricted. Those are very different sentences, and the one that applies to your bread is the second one. Number 2, Jimmy John's parent company, Inspire Brands Roark Capital. Same portfolio as Arby's and Sonic. Jimmy John's built its entire brand around one word: fresh. Freaky fast, Freaky Fresh. The bread is baked in-store daily. That's a genuine operational commitment most sandwich chains don't make. The founder, Jimmy John Liautaud, built his early marketing on the premise of a sandwich shop that actually respected its ingredients. The chain has spent decades earning a specific reputation on that basis. Jimmy John's was acquired by Inspire Brands in 2019 for approximately $3 billion. Inspire Brands is backed by Roark Capital, the same Roark Capital behind Arby's and Sonic. The shared supply chain infrastructure that applies across Inspire's portfolio applies to Jimmy John's flour sourcing as well. Azazidicarbonamide is documented in Jimmy John's own ingredient disclosure materials. Freaky Fresh describes the logistics of baking bread on site every morning. It does not describe the chemistry of the flour that bread is made from. The in-store baking is real. The daily process is real. The azotocarbonamide in the flour going into that oven every morning is also real. Fresh and chemically treated with a banned compound are not mutually exclusive conditions. Jimmy John's has been banking for years on the assumption that customers understand the first fact and never investigate the second. For people who specifically pay a slight premium at Jimmy John's over other sandwich options, because the in-store baking signals a higher ingredient, standard people making what feels like an informed choice, the gap between baked fresh daily and the flour contains ADA, is maintained by never putting both sentences on the same surface. Jimmy John's charges a premium for fresh. The flour that bread is made from contains a compound 30 countries decided wasn't worth the risk. Freaky Fresh. Freaky convenient for everyone but you. That's a lot. And I want to acknowledge something before we move forward. The point was never to tell you that bread is poison or that every sandwich you've eaten was an act of harm. 80 at 45 parts per million is not sending anyone to a hospital tomorrow. The specific structural point is this. 30 countries looked at the same evidence the FDA looked at, applied a different standard of proof, and reached a different conclusion. And the chains selling you bread in America decided that the American standard was sufficient, not because the European standard wasn't available to them as information, but because meeting it costs more than not meeting it. So here's the other half of the deal. 4 operations. That's all we found that genuinely earn a place on this side of the list. Not because the bar is impossible to clear, but because we won't use a compound banned in the EU, is apparently a decision point that separates most of this industry from a smaller portion of it. These are the ones that prove it isn't inevitable. Number 4, Jason's Deli privately held. Founded 1976. Family ownership, Jason's Deli removed MSG, high fructose corn syrup, artificial trans fats, and artificial colors from its full menu in 2008. ADA is not in their bread formulations. That commitment predates the 2014 Subway controversy by 6 years, which means it wasn't a reaction to public pressure or a petition. It was a proactive ingredient standard set before anyone in the mainstream food conversation was asking for it. The chain is privately held, which removes the shareholder pressure that drives cost efficiency decisions at publicly traded chains. Its ingredient commitment has remained consistent through expansion. The chain operates at a mid-market price point, not a premium clean food, positioning which demonstrates that the cost gap between ADA and cleaner dough conditioner alternatives is manageable at commercial scale when ownership decides it is. Jason's Deli is regional, with most locations in the Southeast and Southwest. If you're not in those markets, access is limited. The principle is more transferable than the product itself. What Jason's Deli proves is that the decision was made in 2008 before any petition, before any public pressure, before it was a brand differentiator. That is a categorically different commitment than a reactive removal made under public scrutiny. Number 3, Jersey Mike's privately held. Founder Peter Cancro retains controlling ownership since 1975. Jersey Mike's bakes bread fresh in each location, and its standard sub-rolls do not contain azodicarbonamide. Its founder Peter Cancro has maintained controlling ownership since buying the original shop in Point Pleasant, New Jersey at age 17. The same slub ownership structure has held for 50 years. Ingredient standards set by a founder owner don't get renegotiated by a new private equity firm's margin committee every 3 to 5 years. Jersey Mike's has expanded to over 20,500 locations without losing the in-store baking practice or the ingredient standard that accompanies it. That scale 2,500 locations, fresh baked bread. No ADA is the direct operational refutation of the argument that we have to use it at this scale. Jimmy John's makes that argument implicitly. Jersey Mike's operates at comparable scale and proves it isn't true. The honest caveat: sodium levels across Jersey Mike's sub-lineup are significant, and some of its processed meat sourcing carries separate questions. This is a bread-specific clean record, not a full menu endorsement. What Jersey Mike's proves: 2,500 locations, fresh baked bread, no ADA. Scale is not the reason the other chains made their choice. Number 2. Panera Bread Parent Company. Jabe Holding Company, Luxembourg-based private investment firm Panera, maintains a publicly published no-no list, a formal, named commitment to excluding specific compounds from its food, which includes azodicarbonamide. The list has been public since 2015. ADA's absence from Panera's bread products is independently verifiable through their own ingredient disclosures. The act of publishing a no-no list is itself a structural accountability mechanism. It creates a document the public can check against actual ingredient labels, which is categorically different from a vague "we use quality ingredients" brand claim. Jab Holding Company, Panera's owner, holds a portfolio across coffee, fast casual, and retail, including Keurig Dr. Pepper, Peet's, and Caribou Coffee. The no-no list predates Jez's full ownership and has been maintained through the ownership transition. The honest caveat is significant. Panera has faced wrongful death lawsuits and settlements related to the caffeine content of its charged lemonade beverages cases that revealed meaningful gaps between brand positioning and product reality in other areas of the menu. The no-no list is a genuine, verifiable document for bread ingredients. It is not a guarantee of the full menu. What Panera demonstrates: a large-scale, publicly verifiable commitment to excluding specific banned compounds, with a mechanism for independent confirmation, is operationally achievable. The no-no list exists because someone at Panera decided that transparency on this question was worth more than the flexibility of staying quiet about. Number 1. Whole Foods Market In-Store Bakery Parent Company. Amazon acquired 2017. Whole Foods Market operates its in-store bakeries under a self-imposed unacceptable ingredients standard, a list of over 200 compounds the company commits to excluding from products it sells, including azodicarbonamide. The standard applies to items produced by the in-store bakery. The list has been publicly available since the early 2000s, predating the 2014 ADA controversy by over a decade, and has expanded over time rather than contracted. Amazon's 2017 acquisition of Whole Foods created legitimate concerns about whether ingredient standards would be maintained under a shareholder accountable parent. As of current product disclosures, the unacceptable ingredients list remains in place, and ADA remains absent from Whole Foods bakery products. That may change. It has not yet. The honest caveat is the most important one on this list. Whole Foods is expensive, and its demographic reach is not universal. An ingredient standard that is only practically accessible to a specific income bracket is a partial solution at best. Access to bread without banned compounds should not be a premium product. The Amazon ownership trajectory is worth continued scrutiny. What the Whole Foods unacceptable ingredients list proves is that a hard-named, published, verifiable exclusion list is a mechanism that works. Every chain on the worst side of this video could publish one tomorrow. None of them have. The next time someone hands you a sandwich in America, you'll know that the bread may contain a compound whose breakdown product is classified as a probable human carcinogen, and that the company handing it to you never had to disclose that, because the FDA threshold that covers them was set without applying the same standard that 30 countries already applied. Here's the thesis one final time. The chemical isn't the whole story. The whole story is that the chains on this list knew the EU banned it in 1997. They had access to the same data. They looked at the FDA's 45 ppm threshold and decided that was good enough for you, not for their European customers. For you, specifically. We're already working on the GRAS database, the system, where food companies are permitted to classify their own ingredients as safe, and what we found there makes this look like a warm-up to Stew Stare if you haven't. You'll want to be there for that one. You know now. That matters.